So here's why I will not invest in a fish and chip franchise. And I'm going to add to that why I will not invest in a fish and chip franchise again. So the reason for this video, I was listening to 947 yesterday morning, and the topic of discussion was franchises. And one of the presenters was saying she would love to own these fish and chip franchises. And in my mind, I'm screaming, don't do it, don't do it. And I actually tried to call the radio station, but I just couldn't get through to the number. We own two of those stores. I will not do it again because I own two of them. I lost a lot of money. I won't lie. The first store, in the first year, we actually made money. We made about 200,000, a little over 200,000, which was basically profit that we used towards setting up the next store. And that was more than almost 50% of what we needed, because at that time, those stores were like 400. When we started the first one, it was like 400. Then I think it went to about 500. So we had almost 50% of the setup costs from the profit of the first one. But after that first year, it started going down, right? So I'm going to highlight a few problems that I had with, or we had with that franchise. And bear in mind, we set up our shops with no debt. We didn't have debt on our stores. Both our stores were paid for in full cash, because I didn't want to have a problem paying a bank every month, right? I wanted to keep my cash flow stable. Here's the problem. The problem is in the name. Fish and chips. Let's start with the chips. Potatoes. When we started selling, the potato bag price was about 29 Rand a bag, right? 29 Rand a bag. And what are people buying a lot? They basically call it hot and a lot. They're positioning this brand as a cheap offering. And we were expected to give like a big portion of chips. But guess what happened when things like there was a shortage of potatoes, there's a flood somewhere, because that thing is a commodity, right? You can't control the input price of the potato. So then we went from 29 Rand a bag to like 75 Rand a bag of potatoes. Crazy. Then we were not making any profit because we were selling a lot of chips, so the revenue was there, but your cost of sales, your margins, your gross margin percentage is now reducing, because one of your biggest selling products, you're not making a profit on it because people expect a lot of chips. When we started weighing the chips, then the customers started complaining because they expected a lot of chips. But they don't understand that we're now paying 75 Rand a bag for chips, but we've got to sell it for the exact same price. So you're making a loss, right? So it doesn't make any business sense. That's one of the problems, right? Potato prices are too variable to be, to have that as your main product. When you go into a McDonald's or KFC, you never go in there to buy chips only, right? You're going in there to buy chicken, or you're going in there to buy a burger, and they're giving you like a handful of chips. Just look at the portion of chips that they give you. Whereas now in these stores, it's like chips is the star of the show. That's a big problem, because you're not making any money on it. Second problem is in the fish. Fish is not a cheap product. If you go to any restaurant, one of the most expensive items on that menu is fish. But once again, we were expected to sell fish and chips for 35 Rand. Guess what would happen? Sometimes there's a shortage of hake, and then they have to import it from somewhere else. Now the input price of hake is higher, but guess what? Your price is exactly the same, right? What's the price of a box of hake now? I don't even know if they're selling hake. Then they would change the recipe and say, okay, don't sell hake anymore, sell angelfish. Then the customer complains because now they can see it's not the same type of fish, because there's no consistency. A franchise is supposed to have consistency. When you go to Chicken Licken, when you go to KFC, when you go to McDonald's, you know you're getting the exact same thing all the time. So the profit margins on those stores, in terms of what you are selling, it's too variable, because sometime in the year you're making some good money, but the rest of the year you're not making any money because there's shortages, and then something happens with the weather, and then there's a shortage with one of the input costs. So that is what caused us to lose a lot of money. Let me not even get started on the rent. In our first store, our rent was quite low. It was like 10,000 odd Rand. In the second store, and that store was in Soweto, we were right at the front where people walk past to get to the shop, right? We were right in the front. So we had a brilliant location, but that store still didn't do well, because there our rent, including all other costs, was like over 30,000 a month. Whereas in the first store, it was like including all costs, I don't even think we were paying 20, right? We may be paying like 15 or something like that. The rent was very low at that time. So when you combine all of that, and you combine it, that the model, to me, it just doesn't work. That's why there aren't many of these stores left. It's because the pricing models just don't work. That whole thing needs to be changed. Maybe some people are still in in locations where the rent is quite low, and maybe some of them are making money, but I can tell you the majority of those stores, they don't make money, and that's the biggest reason I would never invest in it. In fact, if I was to invest in most franchises these days, I wouldn't keep them for very long. What we saw, there's a big buzz for the franchise when it opens up in the first 2-3 months. We actually had offers on the first store I should have sold. So I saw that it's better if you basically start this thing up, you run it for 2 or 3 months, put it on sale when it's still very busy, and then you flip it and you go take the money, go do something else. That's just my 2 cents from having being a franchisee.